this video, I'm going to show you how to clean and sharpen your pruners. So just over time, your pruners are going to start to develop this sort of gunkiness to them because plant sap is sticky and stickiness attracts dust. And so over time, you're going to accumulate pieces on here. And as your clippers get sticky, they don't necessarily get dull, but they don't cut as well either. And a lot of times I find that if somebody comes to me complaining that their clippers are dull, it's really just because they're dirty. So to clean these up, I'm going to use some isopropyl alcohol, just regular rubbing alcohol. And I'm going to spritz the clippers on either side. We may end up using more if we need it. But that's just going to help dissolve some of these sticky plant saps. And then I'm going to take like a regular green scrubby, and I'm just going to scrub at all of that stuff that's on there. See how it's kind of loosening that up? And we're just going to kind of keep scrubbing until we can get as much of that gunk off of there as possible. If it starts looking like your gunk is just drying up on there and you're just kind of moving it around, that's when you take your shop rag and you just kind of wipe it off. Make sure you're being really careful about doing this. I almost always wear leather gloves when I'm doing this. Kind of failing right now. Actually, I'm going to switch them. I know better. Every time I try to do this demonstration and I'm not wearing leather gloves, I end up cutting my hands, and then I say, Rachel, you know better. So use your leather gloves so that you don't cut your hands. Okay, so I'm going to just spritz it a little bit more, and I'm just going to get as much of that off as I possibly can. These are coming off pretty quickly because I do keep these clippers fairly well maintained for the volunteers. I go through this pile at least, I don't know, once every 2 months and just make sure that all of them are kind of clean and polished. Wow, look at that. So that's a lot nicer looking, right? Well, compared to the other side there, that still has a lot of gunk on it. You can clean the gunk off of this side too, just because it looks prettier that way. This isn't really your cutting surface here on the outside, so it's kind of just cosmetic. But, you know, since we're here anyways, we might as well make them look as good as we can. Okay, yeah, that comes off really, really nicely. Okay, so this side is really, really nice and clean now. The other side still needs a lot of work. And then our inside cutting surface here, I usually kind of clean that off anyways too, just to make sure that there's nothing majorly sticky on there, because that can slow you down with your clippers. Slowing down is another really important characteristic of why you would want to keep them clean. The more you clip of stuff, the more fatigued your hands are going to get. And so if your clippers are sticky, your hands are actually working harder too. And when you start doing stuff like a lot of rose pruning, or you're doing a huge batch of commercial cuttings, or you're pruning shrubbery or something, all of that really adds up as time and wear and tear on your hands. Okay, there we go. So we're getting these clippers all nice and cleaned up. All right, spray it a little more. And just keep polishing it up on there, you know, until it looks pretty good. I mean, you might never get it back to store-bought quality, right? But you want to get it kind of close. All right, so there we go. I've gotten all of that. Now this part here, whenever I'm getting to do the inside, I usually use my legs as a fulcrum to kind of hold that part open really far. And you definitely want to make sure that you have your leather gloves on when you're in proximity with this really sharp blade here. So I'm going to just hold this open so that I got that piece flat in my leg here. We're going to give that a spritz. And I'm going to take this scrubby and I'm going to go to the inside here now. See, if I didn't have my leather gloves on right now, I would probably be slicing my thumb. And nobody really wants to go to the ER right now, especially not for an injury that could have been prevented with the right protective equipment. Okay, so there we go. We've gotten that pretty well scrubbed clean, so they don't have as much plant gunk on it. I can still see a little bit here towards the tip, but like I said, at some point you got to say that's enough. So now I'm going to take a thing called a whetstone. And this is spelled wet like W-H-E-T, not wet like water. You don't actually use water with this kind of sharpening stone. They're really inexpensive. You can get ones that are like this size for, I don't know, like $3 at your local hardware store. And I'm going to take this whetstone and I'm going to hold my clippers, spread them apart a little bit with your hand here using your trigger finger, and kind of lean them on your lap so that you can hold it into place. And then I'm going to go down and at an angle to follow the curve of my blade with this. If you're not kind of, this blade in general, maybe I can get the light to reflect off of it just right. You can see that bevel right there, right? That curve where it already has like a natural angle. So you want to work with that natural angle by going down at the exact same plane as what this is angled. So we're going to go down and out in one fluid motion. So as I move down, I'm pushing and I'm using a whole big piece of this whetstone here. Another good reason to wear gloves, because I'm getting really close to this finger right here when I'm doing this. Okay. And then it's going to end up giving you some dust on there because you're actually grinding off bits of metal from this and bits of rock from this. I'm going to flip these over onto the other side, and this side doesn't have that bevel on it. See how that's a flat portion of the blade here? So it's a one-sided bevel with this single side being on here and then this side being flat. So when I sharpen this side, really what I'm doing is I'm just trying to get off any burrs that I might have created from the opposite side, or from if you used your clippers to cut something metallic that you shouldn't have, like you were trimming through and you accidentally cut a wire on something. You might end up with a burr on the inside of this, and so you can use your whetstone to get rid of that. We're going to go flat, and we're going to go towards the outside. And I usually like to do a little bit on one side, and then I flip over to the other side. Okay. And then I go back to this side again. And I do that 2 or 3 times just to make sure that it's sharp. You can test it out on something if you want. Don't test it on your fingers. That's why we're wearing our personal protective equipment. And you can do this on your loppers. You can do this on clippers. It's a little bit harder to do on some of the really tiny specialty trimming clippers. Sometimes people will use like the scissor sharpener for that. There's a lot of different kinds of sharpeners that you can use. Just figure out what works for you. I have found that these little whetstones fit really nicely in my hand and they get the job done right. So the last thing that you would probably want to do for your clippers while you're maintaining them is just give it a little squirt of like WD-40 around this joint mechanism here. I actually don't have any in the shed with me right now, or I'd show you how to do that. But you want to just get it in that joint on both sides, and then just clean off the excess. And that is how you refurbish or clean up your pruners. Very important skill to have.